I see the Packers and the Lions, and then I see the 49ers in the Super Bowl, and I'm really, really mad. This is RamView.
It's hot out there, but let's blow them off the line of scrimmage. Headline, Los Angeles.
Live from the Ram Cave, I'm Joe Terosian, and this is RamView, the January 29th, 2024 edition, brought to you by Kistler Law Firm. Injured in an auto accident? Need help? Got questions? Call Kistler Law at 661-206-6990. That's Kistler Law at 661-206-6990. And check out KistlerLawFirm.com. That's one word, KistlerLawFirm.com. Kistler Law, they've been fighting for you since 92. And by Temple City Auto Repair. Having some auto issues? Get yourself some John and Henry at TempleCityAutoRepair.com. And of course, by Granite Ridge Christian Camp, a place where your life can change. So we weren't here on Friday. We did do 3 shows. We did a show on Thursday. And then news broke about Raheem Morris getting the job. So we're going to talk about Raheem Morris getting the job, Rams searching for a new DC, remembering Deacon Jones and Willie Ellison on this day. But before we get to that, we got to talk about conference finals and football and why I'm mad, right? I'm so mad. I was as mad yesterday as when I broke my water jug. I broke my water jug when the Rams lost to Baltimore, and I felt like breaking something yesterday. It's easy to admit when I'm mad because I get mad. I understand that. I get mad. So I'm not making up anything for a big surprise, right? And I'm certainly more than happy to admit when I'm right. I said the Rams would be in the playoff hunt, that they'd win 9 games, and if things broke the right way, they can get 10. And the Rams were in the playoff hunt, actually made the playoffs. So I'm happy to say I was right about that. But I was dead wrong when I said the Rams weren't a Super Bowl team. I'm not talking about being a Super Bowl winner, but the Rams were a Super Bowl team. I missed it. It was my bad. This NFC postseason has proven it, okay? Yeah, Dallas kicked the Rams' butt at a weird time during the season, but they looked horrible against Green Bay. Green Bay should have beat the Packers. Rams had an opportunity to beat the Lions. Lions had an opportunity to beat the 49ers, right? And I'm watching this, and I'm just dying. How this Frisco team, won both of its playoff games by a combined 6 points and needed mistakes by teams that are both young and inexperienced, a young quarterback in the playoffs, and they needed all that help to get to the Super Bowl, and they're supposed to be this vaunted team. And I'm looking at it, and I just see the Rams would not have melted the way the Packers and Lions did. McVay and Stafford and even Raheem Morris's defense would have beat this fraudulent 49ers team. And that's what I mean, right? As this postseason plays out, this 49er team just looks more and more fraudulent. I give them credit for coming back and winning and not quitting. They're not a bad team, but I kept hearing out the greatest personnel in the league, and they're this and they're that. And I'm looking at a team that needed a fumble and a freak play to get back into the NFC title game. They needed several drops and to get back in the NFC title game. And I think their defense stinks in relation to what it's been built up into. I'm really happy they made that deal for Chase Young. I hope they signed Chase Young to a real long, fat contract, because as long as Chase Young is there eating salary cap for the 49ers, the Rams are always going to be in good shape when they play the red and gold. Nick Bosa got a couple of sacks yesterday, but even he, to me, is not what they're paying him for, right? And then Armstead and Hargrave, this is a soft group. Their safeties aren't good. Hufnagel is good, but he's out. The best part of this team is their defense, is their linebackers, and on defense is their linebackers Fred Warner and Trey Greenlaw, and they're just super susceptible, right? We talk about the Rams secondary all year. That 49er secondary is not much better. Now, Brock Purdy was out of his mind yesterday. He played very well. Good for him. But Detroit gave this game away, and the Rams wouldn't have. And that's the part I was really angry about, because it made me realize I was wrong. In the NFC, the Rams were a Super Bowl team. So I'm mad, almost as mad as I was when the Rams lost to the Ravens in OT, because even as you study the Rams all year, like we do, watch it day after day after day, you find out that you're wrong. And this Rams team, one break here or there against Detroit, and the Rams go to Levi, we leave them in tears because, they're just not that good. And I think as of right now, this is the most easiest call for a Super Bowl I've had in years. And we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. Let's look at the conference title games, the NFC title game. Dan Campbell's decisions on fourth down, the KBM, the Kiss Butt Media is just loving it because it gives them opportunity to say he's emotional and he's a meathead. But you are really lazy. And I'm saying all the KBM, even Colin Cowherd, I heard him say the same thing, that Dan Campbell did all of those decisions on emotion. Dan Campbell's decisions on fourth down last night were not based on emotion, not for a minute. They were choices. They were the kind of choices he was consistently making all year. And the KBM, which is lazy and always going for low-hanging fruit in its typical effort to drive down on Detroit's AC, is coming after him today, right? When Josh Reynolds dropped that pass on fourth down, the first time they went for it on fourth down, they were elated. Everyone was elated. But it was Josh Reynolds dropping the pass on fourth down. And I don't care if he had to move a little bit. It was in his hands, it was in his arms, and he dropped it. And to say that was a decision based on emotion, it's just lazy. I will say the first call on fourth down was right. Reynolds dropped the ball. The second call on fourth down, I didn't agree with. I think he should have kicked the field goal to tie the game. But this is who they were all season. And I don't think, and I don't believe for a minute, any emotion was involved in it. If you want to say he had some emotion, it was maybe in the Dallas game because he was really hacked. But that wasn't the case here. They made the decisions they always make. And I thought the second one was the poor one. The first one, there was no problem with it. And it's the, everyone that's after him right now, they're the elitists who don't know how to do anything but judge a book, but by its cover. Not its content, but by its cover. And they're likely to judge someone by the color of their skin rather than the content of their character, because he looks like an alpha male, he's this, he's that, and he's just a meathead and fitting the stereotype. And so I'll defend Dan Campbell on that aspect of it. It wasn't emotion-based. The second time they went for it after they were down 27-24, I will say it was a bad call, just like Burke made a bad call in Aliens. It was a bad call, right? Next point, Josh Reynolds showed why the Rams didn't give him a second contract. And last night, Reynolds basically did everything he could to not be brought back to Detroit next season because he's a free agent. I know everyone's going to say it's just 2 drops, but it was 2 key forced to leave the field kind of drops, right? His drops were game changers. They weren't just drops on first down. They were drops on whether or not your team was going to stay on the field, and he came up short big time last night. And again, I'll say it again, we got to move past Frisco being a great team. They're not. They're cruising for a bruising. They're aging, facing salary cap trouble, and these things will rise even more after KC beats them in the Super Bowl. I do have a question also about that game. I want to know if the Lions defensive back, Kendall Vidor, the corner, if he makes the pick on that deep pass that bounced off his helmet and Ayuk made a great play on, what was the official throwing the flag for? And who was he throwing the flag on that play? Because he was throwing it on Vidor, but how did you throw it on Vidor when he was the one ahead of the receiver going after the ball? How do you throw it on him? He threw it on Vidor because if it was on Ayuk, that penalty would have stood. It would have stood, as opposed to maybe he just waved it off. I thought that was pretty cheesy, and I think the officials had dodged a bullet on that one. But it took the Ayuk play, which was a great play. It took the Gibbs fumble. I hadn't seen the guy fumble all year. It took the Jahmyr Gibbs fumble, a bad decision on the second fourth down attempt, and then the drops. the receivers, they dropped the ball. Reynolds dropping 2. All these things came together to let Frisco off the hook. The Lions definitely lost this game. As I could say, the Packers the week before definitely lost this game. So really, Frisco is riding the heels of 2 young teams breaking down late. Now, I'll give them credit. They took advantage of it, but please, this is not a great Frisco team. All right, getting over to the AFC, all the Taylor Swift stuff aside, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are just great, right? They're just great. And their strength is they got all this good mojo to overcome what I believe is Swift's bad mojo. Anytime I see Swift on the field hugging, I don't know. I can't treat them like normal people. It feels fraudulent. But I was wrong about the Chiefs. I thought the Chiefs were lucky to play the Dolphins in the first round. That was a banged-up defense. The Bills in the second round, that was a banged-up defense. And so I thought, man, they're going to get they're going to get shown how it is when they get to Baltimore, because that is a good defense. And Travis Kelce took it to Kyle Hamilton. I thought Kyle Hamilton would do it to him, but no, Kelce was great. Maybe the last hurrah, maybe one more moment for the master, because I think he was trending towards retirement, but he spiked it up for one more game and maybe just one more game in 2 weeks. But he was great. He was great yesterday. And Mahomes Mahomes should be the first player. He should be the first active player. If they win the Super Bowl, which I think they will, but he should be the first active player immediately advanced to the Hall of Fame, because that guy is he's off the charts. He's off the charts. And I'm very slow because I was always Montana was the best that I ever saw. And then it was hard pressed because I wanted to stay on Montana but Brady was just unbelievable. But the more you watch Mahomes, man, it's just, wow. It's unbelievable. Second thing on that AFC title game, the refs didn't take the game away from the Ravens. I don't know where everyone's talking about this. A great Kansas City defense that shut out Josh Allen last week, or shut him down. They shut down the Ravens this week. And then KC also has a quarterback, right? And so I don't see where you get the officials took this game away from the Ravens. That KC defense, former Ram head coach Steve Spagnuolo, the DC forever with Andy Reid, he made Lamar Jackson look like a first or second year player when throwing the ball. And he really exposed a lot of Jackson's deficiencies, right? Next point is, in regards to that game, I'm a little different than most. I'm a little more 20th century, and I view this in a good way. I'm not going to change because I don't want to change. I see where there's room to change. You can change and fit in with everybody. But I'm not going to go up to Zay Flowers and pat him on the back and say, I love you, bro, and be a good teammate that way. No, I'm going to be a really good teammate and get in his grill. The fumble in the end zone can happen to anybody, but that wouldn't have happened if Flowers didn't get hit with the taunting penalty, pushing his team back and forcing them to run 3 more plays just to get back to the same spot. And then he fumbles the ball. That never would have occurred if he hadn't acted like a jackwagon, very selfish when he pushed down L'Jarius Sneed. And of course, it's Sneed that comes back and punches the ball away at the goal line, right? So I'm not consoling him, right? When you're in the professional ranks, making professional big-time money, I'm going to tell him he screwed up. I'm not going to say it's okay. I'm not going to cut him, but I'm going to make sure he knows that he hurt us. Maybe didn't cost us the whole game. But I'm going to let him know that he hurt us, and I'm going to make him feel it, and I want him to suffer all season for it. And when a professional athlete or any athlete who takes stock in himself suffers for that, knowing it was his fault and his mistake, they hopefully grow from it and never do it again. If I'm John Harbaugh, every time that kid flashes his muscles, makes some stance that's a non-touchdown, I'm fining him something, because it's ridiculous. He did that for the cameras. He did it for ESPN. He did it for his friends. He did it for his ego. And guess what? He sabotaged his team. And so no consolation. I'm not hugging you. I wonder how OBJ would have felt hugging him if OBJ didn't get that ring for the Rams. And this was his last shot, because you know what? OBJ looked kind of old BJ yesterday. He wasn't even Down the stretch, he made a couple of catches, but you figure an OBJ would be in the game plan, and he really wasn't because he's pretty much washed. He could still play in the NFL, but he's not a game changer anymore. And if he hadn't got the ring with the Rams, I wonder how he would be feeling towards Zay Flowers today. I certainly wouldn't cut him any slack. And if I'm somebody on that Ravens team, I'm not cutting him any slack either. I'm getting in his grill. Sometimes you need tough love, and maybe a little more than just tough love. That Chiefs defense made things rough on Lamar Jackson. He's going to win his MVP, and he does deserve it. But we need to stop including Lamar Jackson in the list of being the best of the best. I'm going to say this. He's a great quarterback who is merely a good passer. I've said this earlier. He's a great quarterback. He's a good leader. He uses all the intangibles. The touchdown throw he made yesterday was fantastic. You know he works hard, right? You know he works hard. You've seen his body change over his career. So he is a great quarterback, but he's merely a good passer. And I'm tired of people overestimating his arm talent. He is not in the same league with Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, C.J. Stroud, Matthew Stafford, Justin Herbert. He's not in the top 5 of any category with those guys because he just doesn't have the arm for it. He doesn't have the arm skill for it. He's worked hard at his craft, but I think he's hit his ceiling, and he probably just needs to get a little more, I don't know, a little more training, but he's never going to be an elite passer, just never. And being on the same stadium with Patrick Mahomes yesterday only magnified that situation. You could watch Lamar Jackson play in a highlight or play some other team. Didn't look that great. You know, the Ravens didn't look that great against the Rams, did they? Last team to really give them a game before the Chiefs. And you could see Lamar Jackson and you'd say, wow, that guy's a really good quarterback. But then he's in the glare of how bright Patrick Mahomes shines, and you realize he's got light years to go before he gets to that level. So with that said, the Super Bowl, as of this morning, for me, this feels like a real easy call, as easy a call as I've ever made. And I could be wrong. You know, everyone's wrong. That's why we don't bet. But I'm looking at a really good KC defense, a really good KC defense. I'm looking at some tough DBs. I'm looking at L'Jarius Sneed. He's not going to be out physicaled by very much against a Deebo Samuel or a Brandon Ayuk, right? I'm looking at a Chris Jones coming up the middle. I'm looking at this KC defense that blitzes left and right and gets home, gets to the quarterback. And then on top of that, you got Andy Reid, who's got 2 weeks to prepare for that underachieving Frisco defense. Oh, and then there's this guy called Patrick Mahomes, right? Chiefs are going to win this Super Bowl. Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl. So as much as I didn't want it to happen, I'll put up with a little bit of Taylor to bring about some 49er tears. And I am sorry for the Lions. I think it's going to be a bit of a challenge next year. I think Dan Campbell said it. You know, well, he didn't say they're going to lose Ben Johnson, but they probably will. And then he said, we're not going to sneak up on anybody. Everyone knows we're here now. Good job to him for changing that culture and that view towards the Lions. But yeah, it's going to be tougher, and they're going to have to make some calls. But you know what? Between Campbell and Brad Holmes, they'll get it done. Speaking of Ben Johnson possibly going to Washington, other places around the NFL have solidified their coaching staffs to the key spots. The Eagles, Vic Fangio, DC, Kellen Moore, OC, working with Nick Sirianni. Kevin Stefanski has hired Ken Dorsey, the fired Bills OC, has his OC in Cleveland. And Harbaugh hired his DC from Michigan, Jess Minter, who has NFL experience. And then finally, before we get back into it, talk about Raheem Morris here. Everyone was talking about when Raheem Morris got the job. I was on the road. And in fact, our sponsor, Paul Kistler, texted me and he says, Raheem got the job. And I said, are you serious? And I couldn't do anything because I was already on the road going north. And people on the radio were going crazy when I found it, saying, does this mean now that Bill Belichick, how can the greatest head coach of all time not be hired? Well, when your greatest head coach of all time, acts like a real douche, people don't want to be around you. When you don't want to share power, people don't want to be around you. And I go back to that classic example for Bill Belichick. When we're leaders, right, there are people who respect you, right? They respect everything about you, and all they want is a little bit of an attaboy. And my mind went back 2 seasons ago. I saw the video. I didn't see the game. I saw the video, and I went back to look at the video again. The special teams player, I think he played at Texas, linebacker Brendan Schooler, recovered a muff punt or a fumbled ball, and he was coming to the sidelines, and he wanted to give it to Bill Belichick. And Belichick just looks at him like he's got the plague. And, I understand Belichick's in the game and everything, but you know what? You have no self-awareness of what it maybe meant to this guy. You just give him a smile and say, okay, Chief, I'll take it later. Someone else hold the ball for me. Talk to him privately, embarrass him privately. But you try to play this tough guy, jackwagon stuff. All you do is you come off looking really, really stupid. You look like a real douche. And Belichick's suffering for that because no one wants to be around a failed hard butt, a victorious hard butt, a guy that's a winning hard butt, someone might tolerate. But right now, he's not a victorious hard butt. He's just an old, crusty hard butt, and no one wants to be around him. You got to treat people better. It reminded me of Steve Carlton. Steve Carlton, lefty with the Phillies. Remember, he was renowned. Maybe you don't remember. One of the greatest left-handers of all time, but for a decade or more, Cardinals and Phillies. And he was dominant left-hander. And he was famous for not talking to the media. But when his arm started to go and he started bouncing around a little bit, guess who started talking to the media, right? And I know it's like, now you want to talk? Sorry, I don't need anything from you now. You could have given us something 10 years ago, but you played hard, dude, hard butt, and now no one wants anything to do with you. This is Belichick, right? Doesn't kill you to smile at a kid who's probably going to be in the NFL for 3 seasons that plays special teams. But no, you wanted to be the tough guy, or you were so clueless you can't see the bigger picture around you. That's why people still like Pete Carroll. And I think Pete Carroll could still coach in this league. So interesting thing to say. So the Patriots, of course, Gerard Mayo. Tennessee hired Brian Callahan. Falcons hired Raheem Morris. Carolina, David Canales. Chargers, Jim Harbaugh. Raiders, Antonio Pierce. So one of the ones is the McDonald guy, the DC from the Ravens, is appearing to be the leading candidate in Seattle. And I think if it's not him, it'll be Dan Quinn. It's really interesting. People thought Quinn had the job locked up. And most everybody's talking right now that Ben Johnson will leave the Lions and go to Washington, where he has the 2nd overall pick, and he can take his choice of quarterbacks outside of Caleb Williams. So that's a good deal for him, something to think about going forward. But Raheem Morris, right, in an age where everyone's hiring offensive-minded coaches, they hired a DC, and everyone and their mother says Raheem Morris is a good guy. I wasn't thrilled with Raheem Morris in 2021, but there was a stretch there after November, say December through January, where the Rams defense started to click, and he looked really good as the DC. All of 2022, maybe it's because of the personnel, but it really didn't matter because the Rams had to know when you're on your 3rd string offensive lineman who just got hired from the Costco, you knew you weren't going to win. And I felt like the Rams were just way too passive defensively. And you remember they were 5, 6, 7, 8 yards off the ball. But that changed this year, didn't it? Right? You saw those cornerbacks, Killer Witherspoon, Darian Kendrick. They were up playing press, and it was refreshing to see. And it kept those receivers covered just a split second longer to maybe help with the pass rush for a guy like the conductor or Aaron Donald. Raheem Morris did a good job. And I admit, I didn't like him at first, but he did a great job. I'm happy he got a job. And we'll see from there. So the Rams are going to be looking for their 4th DC in the Sean McVay era. And, Raheem Morris was 3 years. Wade Phillips was 3 years. Brandon Staley was 1 year. And there's a lot of talk about bringing Brandon Staley back. And I'm not too thrilled about that. Who came to mind for me was Ejiro Evero, who was with the Rams. I think it was in 2020. 2021 was in Denver. And then I think he went to Carolina. I was thinking about him. And then, of course, it says that Ron Rivera was interviewed. And Ron Rivera plays generally a 4-3 defense. So that was interesting to see, in terms of what the Rams will be looking for in terms of personnel. Aubrey Pleasant has been interviewed. Chris Shula, they're the guys on the staff. We did know about Staley, and we have heard about Denard Wilson from the Ravens. the one name that I wasn't sure of, I wasn't even sure if I even heard of the guy before, Aiden Dirty from Dallas. He's their defensive line coach. So I did bring up a question like, who was the Rams' longest serving DC of all time? And if you could come up with that one, and he actually served 9 years as the Rams DC. Let me know before the show is over. I didn't really plan this for a special quiz part of the show, but before we get to commercial. Last part of the good news on Raheem Morris is the Rams get 2 number 3 picks because he's minority hire. And one of those picks will be this April 3rd round compensatory. And so it'll probably be about 104, 105, someplace in there. And that means the Rams have 11 draft picks this April. Before making any trades, they have 11 draft picks. So that's a good deal. All right. My name is Joe Terosian. I was a sports writer for 21 years, one of the founding guys at Mid-Valley Sports. Thank you, folks, for those of you who clicked on recently. So I do RamView thanks to our sponsors at Kistler Law and Temple City Auto, as well as I support myself that way. I also write books. My books are on Amazon, and just type in Joe Terosian, JOE-TOROSIN, and you can find my books there. Between RamView and my books, it helps sustain me in my day job. I am a pastor of a small church in Burbank called Burbank Faith Nazarene. And you can find us right here on YouTube at Burbank Faith Virtual. And also check us out on Spotify, at least for RamView. Check out RamView on Spotify. We thought when we broke this thing in a few years ago that we would basically make our hay on Spotify, and it really hasn't happened. We're hardly a blip on Spotify, but we've caught fire here on YouTube. Thanks to you guys for supporting us. Anytime you have any questions, please let me know. I love answering questions, and we're going to answer some right now, and we'll go from there. But those that have just signed on, thank you so much, and we'll just keep you informed. We will be here all the off season, 3 days a week, doing everything and anything, talking Rams football and the NFL. Steve Ramirez, Lamar is not a semi-truck, he's a trailer. Oh, there you go. You know what he thought? You know what I think of him, Steve? I know this is going to hit you probably a little differently, but because you were around in those days, is because Lamar Jackson's completely talented, super talented, right? And I will say he's a great quarterback with merely an average arm talent. And it made me think a little bit of Joe Kapp, because Joe Kapp was a great leader. He was a great everything at quarterback. He just didn't have a superior arm. Now, Jackson's a better athlete than that, but that's what I was thinking is that if he gets to the next level, if he gets to a Super Bowl, it's not going to be because his arm is elite. And maybe that might keep him from getting to that next level. Tim Burns, Dan not kicking that third quarter field goal. He went for it. I knew he messed up. Are you talking about the first one or the second one? Because the first one, yes, it didn't work, but they put the ball right in Josh Reynolds' hands and he dropped it. The second one, I absolutely agree with you. He should have kicked it and made it 27-27. Tim Burns, Jamar Gibbs is special. Absolutely, he is special. He is. All right, next, I believe Bill is answering my quick question here. Who was the longest serving DC for the Rams? And yeah, from 1982 to 1990, Fritz Schirmer served as Rams DC. He's technically not listed with the Rams as a DC in 1982, but he was hired by the team in 82, and he was John Robinson's coordinator from 83 through 90 before he was replaced by the one I am not allowed to name, and you can figure that one out. Good job, Bill. Tim Burns, Detroit shores up secondary, and they will be golden. I do think there's an issue there, though, Tim, in terms of Detroit going forward. And I think Campbell hit it on the head, is that they're not going to sneak up on anybody. I think they're viewed as a legitimate NFC power now. So, yeah, I think they'll be better in one sense, personnel-wise, because I think, their GM is good. Brad Holmes is good. Campbell is good. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Goff after another year. But Ben Johnson being gone, that's going to be an adjustment, and it'll be interesting to see how they handle that. But I think it's definitely looking up in Detroit. And we were talking about a Detroit Ram rivalry, and I'm going to share something here right after break to talk a little bit more about that Ram Lions rivalry. Bill, I want the Giants defensive coordinator. Yeah, Wink Martindale. Yeah, Wink Martindale's out there. I think he's a kind of a crusty dude too. And, I'm not buying anything about Belichick becoming the Rams DC. I think it's more likely that a Martindale would, but I don't know. What kind of guy is he going to be? Remember when, who was it? Was it Greg Williams was the Rams DC, right? And he was just wasn't a nice guy, and so you got to relate to these guys. You can't just talk trash all the time. But it would be interesting to see. But that's the weird part about drafting a DC or the DC we hire. Are we going to stick with that Fangio system that Brandon Staley brought in 2020 and Raheem Morris, built upon the last 3 years? Because that's going to depend on what your future is going to be. If that's the case, if someone like a Ron Rivera come into the Rams, change their whole defensive scheme and go to a 4-down front, right? And that will change your draft status, your draft picture, and everything. And so it's a lot to think about in terms of bringing in a new DC. All right, so we got the commercial in. Thanks a lot, guys. But the Rams schedule is not finalized. Who they play is listed. You can just type that in anywhere, and you'll see who's on the Rams schedule next year. But the dates, of course, that comes out much later this year in terms of where they play and when. But the teams they're playing, the other 11 that they face, because we know Cardinals, 49ers, Seahawks are 6 out of 17. So the other 11 are the Bears, the Lions, Packers, Vikings, Bills, Dolphins, Patriots, Jets, Eagles, Raiders, and Saints. Now, they do get the Packers, Vikings, Bills, Dolphins, Eagles, and Raiders at SoFi. The Eagles again at SoFi this year. And finally, for the first time since forever, because every year since 2020, the Rams have been playing in Lambeau. And finally, the Packers are coming out here to play at SoFi. So those will be home games for the Rams. And we had talked about this. We all talked about this leading up to the playoff game between the Rams and Lions, that this could be, since there are two teams on the ascent, that a Rams-Lions rivalry could be building. And depending on when they play next year and everything, depending on all the heat that went on between in the Twitter sphere and on all the blogs, the real vitriol between Ram fans and Lion fans, I think that Lions-Rams rivalry is really something that could be brewing. But I look at some of these other teams the Rams are playing. Next year, do I expect the Rams to be better than the Bears? Yeah. Do I expect them to compete? If they're at home, I think they're going to be better than the Packers. I think they're going to be better than the Vikings. I think they're going to be better than the Bills. I think they're going to be better than the Dolphins. Patriots and Jets on the road. Yeah, right now, but who knows when they play, weather and all that stuff. Eagles, yeah, I think so. Raiders are going to be really interesting. And, of course, the Saints, because the Saints are in love with Dennis Allen. Of course, that game will be in the Superdome. So that's an interesting idea to see. We'll start to break that down more and more as the offseason goes on, what you could project the Rams as far as wins next year. I definitely see them in double digits. Where they're at in double digits, I don't know. Zach Robinson, Rams passing game coordinator. He went with Raheem Morris to Atlanta. He's going to be the Falcons OC. A lot of talent there. They just got to find a quarterback. A couple things that popped up in my feed talking about Rams getting under the salary cap. And it's like, I thought it was kind of funny they said that. It's the Rams are fine with the salary cap, but if they wanted to create more space. And I was reading a couple of articles there that talked about, the Rams making moves to get more space under the cap. Joe Noteboom and Brian Allen, the usual suspects this offseason, were mentioned, but I felt like the writer was searching a little bit for the rest of it, because you could talk about Brian Allen and Joe Noteboom and have a really good conversation about, hey, how do we get out from under their contracts and have more cap space? But the other players they were talking about the Rams cutting were Hunter Long, Ben Skoranek, and Darian Kendrick to save cap space. These guys aren't making any money. Skoranek's going into the last year of his contract. Darian Kendrick's going into his third year. And Hunter Long, he's not making hardly anything anyway. And so it's really, to me, it felt like desperate dead period material. I need something to talk about with the Rams, so I'm going to bring it up. I could see Long not coming back. A lot of injuries. I can see him not coming back. That's an easy one. Could I see the Rams moving off Kendrick? Yeah, I could see the Rams moving off Kendrick. That's an easy call to see the Rams moving off of Kendrick, especially with a new DC coming in and not sure where they're going to go. I would be surprised to see Skoranek going anywhere. I am surprised when people talk about Skoranek like the Rams depend on him in the passing game. Skoranek is a nice fifth receiver, at best a fourth receiver, but he's really good on special teams. He can block. He gives you options. Everything the Rams have gotten out of this guy for a 7th round, 249 overall pick has been gold. I don't see the Rams moving off of him. And again, I don't want to belabor this too much because we talked about it last week, but maybe there's new followers out there. The top 2 candidates for cut that have salaries that just don't fit, it seems, are Joe Noteboom and Brian Allen. Noteboom, you don't save anything if you cut Noteboom before June 1st. Really nothing, right? But if you cut him after, there is some savings there. But if you cut him after, you'll have the dough. But where are you going to find the depth to replace Joe Noteboom? And you don't have to like Joe Noteboom to recognize that he provides quality depth. In fact, he's overpaid. I agree. But the one thing he has is every time he has to be plug and play for a game or two, the guy's fantastic. It's when you lock him in permanently that you have some struggles. And so I don't know if I want to get rid of Noteboom, and I don't know if I want to get rid of Allen, which would save money. It depends on where the Rams go in the draft and what they get in, or if they have their eyes on somebody else. But I'd want depth because the Rams Super Bowl window is open. It's an open Super Bowl window right now, and you don't want to stick a Warren McClendon or a Logan Bruss or an A.J. Akuri in for an injured Rob Havenstein or a Larrick Jackson when you've already got salary cap room. You already got room to make moves this offseason just because you want to save a little more and you kick Joe Noteboom to the curb. So keep Joe Noteboom. He provides depth. And Brian Allen, if I'm Matthew Stafford, I'm in the room and I'm telling the Nick Snead organization that no, I want to stay upright. Because if anything happens to these other guys, I want to make sure I can still pass the ball downfield. Brian Allen has a lesser contract. He'd be a little easier to cut. And then there's always that talk that came from day one when Steve Avila was drafted that many thought his position in the pros would be center. The Rams could do that, make Coleman Shelton a really good backup piece because he's inexpensive if you could sign him. He's a free agent. And then go after another guard in the draft. We'll see. I just think right now this line has proven itself. I want to give it depth, maybe obviously draft more offensive linemen, but I don't want to put Noteboom in the street, nor Allen right now. I want depth for Matthew Stafford. So that's all I can say about that. Looking around, other things here, Rams stuff, not much else happening. David Long, right? 3rd round pick, 79th overall out of Michigan back in 2019. Played his 4 years with the Rams, signed with the Raiders this offseason, bounced around the league, was with the Packers recently, and he was just dropped from their practice squad. Just thought we'd put that out there. When it comes to breaking down positions and depth and stuff, this is the time of year when we start doing all that in terms of let's look at this position and that position. And it's all good stuff. I'm going to hold off a little bit till we get through the Super Bowl, and then we'll have from the Super Bowl, which is by the time that's over, we'll be almost in mid-February, and we'll have only a month to go before we get to the start of the new league season on March 13th. And so we'll have a whole lot of stuff to talk about because that's when cuts and everything will be made. And it gives you a better view of the free agent market and everything else going on. All right. So Super Bowl, 2 weeks, Chiefs, 49ers. Right now, if you asked me, I'd say Chiefs 33, 49ers 17. Chiefs aren't going to give back a lead. Chiefs aren't going to surrender or fall apart like the Packers and Lions. And they've got a great defense. And I think Frisco is a bit overrated. So we'll call it the Joe Montana Bowl, the Steve Bono Bowl, or the Elvis Gerbach Bowl. Whatever bowl you want to call it, we'll call it that. And we'll just have more fun with the Super Bowl going forward. And the week of the Super Bowl, we'll be getting a little more serious about breaking down some of the games and aspects of it and everything. In fact, I'm going to be in Las Vegas during Super Bowl weekend, so that should be fun. Okay, I think we got it. Did we get it there, dude? Yeah, I think we got it.
It was a stone groove, my man.
And it's a stone groove, but we're not quite done. On this date in 1972, the Rams sent David Deacon Jones, 14th round pick, number 186 overall in 1961, out of Mississippi Valley State, which is now. They sent him to the Chargers with some baggage, some extra players. I'm not even going to bother naming them. And the Rams got back 2 second-round picks and a third-round pick. Now, this is a great trade for the Rams because Deacon Jones was at the end of his run. He played 11 years for the Rams, and he had a double-digit sack season in 72. In 70. 71, he dipped, and I guess it was Tommy Prothro. I don't know who it was. It wasn't a Don Klosterman move, but they sent him to the Chargers for 2 second-round picks. A second-round pick in 1972 that became Jim Bertelsen, a second-round pick in 1973 that became Cullen Bryant, and a third-round pick by the name of Tim Stokes, who was a backup tackle for the Rams, and the Rams moved him for some pieces later on. But that was a really good deal. When Jones played, of course, the sack was an official stat, but NFL Films and archivists went back and they went through game film and they started tagging these players that played before 1982 with their number of sacks. And Deacon Jones, when he left the Rams, had about 159 and a half sacks. And his remaining 3 years in the league, I think it was 2 years in San Diego, 1 year in Washington when he was reunited with George Allen, he basically combined for 14 sacks over his last 3 seasons. So the Rams got the best out of him, then, of course, scored with Bertelsen and Cullen Bryant. 1 year later, in 1973, the Rams also made a trade. Now, this was a Don Klosterman special. The Rams sent Willie Ellison, who had been a second-round pick, 33 overall in 1967 out of Southern, I think it was, or was it Texas Southern? And he was a competent back for the Rams. 3 or 4 really good years, had a 1,000-yard season in 71, literally probably his last great season, really good season. And by 72, he was banged up. And they put him together with Pete Beathard, the backup quarterback that nobody liked. And they sent them to Kansas City on this day in 1973, right around draft time, for linebacker Bob Stein, backup, a number 2 pick in the 73 draft, and a number 4 pick in the 73 draft. That number 2 pick was Jim Youngblood, who ended up having an amazing career for the Rams and was with them through the 83 season. And, of course, Eddie McMillan, who was a pretty solid corner from day one, wasn't great, but competent, and eventually lost his job to the Rod Perrys and Pat Thomases of the world, and he was lost to the expansion draft of the Seahawks in 76. But that was a great trade by the Rams that day. On this date in 1974, the Rams took John Cappelletti, number 11 overall, and safety Bill Simpson at number 50 out of Michigan State. That was a heck of a pick. Cappelletti had a great college career. We know he was solid for the Rams, and then his body kind of broke down on him. Bill Simpson was a great NFL safety. 5 years for the Rams, set out 79 season, and then another 3 years with Chuck Knox reunited with the Bills. And when you look at Bill Simpson, my thought was when he was with the Bills, he was just a part-time player. No, he was a starter, and I think he picked off like 12 or 15 passes for the Bills in his 3 years there in 80 through 82. So something to throw out there. Bill, our guy that answered who was the longest tenured Rams DC, was Fritz Schumer, and it says on this day in 1982, the Rams hired Fritz Schumer. So something to think about there. Happy birthday to Aeneas Williams. He is, what is he, about 56 today? And happy birthday to Quentin Lake, who just turned 25. Quentin Lake was one of the surprises of this season. Amen? Amen. Last thing I want to mention in terms of that trade regarding Cullen Bryant and the trade that brought in the Jim Youngblood pick. Tomorrow is January the 30th, and I wanted to throw this out there. On January the 30th, 1973, the Rams took part in the NFL draft. Number 31 overall, they took Cullen Bryant. He was with us through the Super Bowl season, fantastic player. Number 37 overall, they took Ron Jaworski, who led his team and had a great career in Philly and led his team to the Super Bowl. Number 42 overall, it was Jim Youngblood. Then, of course, we talked about Stokes. We talked about McMillan. At number 99 overall, they drafted Terry Nelson, who was playing on the Rams Super Bowl team. Number 129 overall, they drafted Cody Jones. And he was with the Rams for a decade as a solid interior defensive player. But again, Don Klosterman, that era of the Rams, that one draft, really, and you can see how it set the Rams up for a decade. And, of course, tomorrow is the 24th anniversary of Mike Jones making the tackle and the Rams beating the Tennessee Titans 23-16. I bring that up because especially, well, it's history, but people have asked me if do I count the St. Louis years? Yes, I count the St. Louis years. I do. I tried to move away from the Rams, but there was no moving away from the Rams. The Rams were always my team, and I didn't like Georgia, but the Rams were my team. And so I rejoiced in that win, got sick when I heard her talk afterwards. And so someone asked me, do I want St. Louis fans? I want St. Louis fans because the reason I want St. Louis fans, because if I accept St. Louis, that means I get the greatest show on turf. I get Steven Jackson. I get Kurt Warner and Marshall Faulk and all that stuff. And yes, I was angry when we lost to the Patriots. I was angry when we lost to the Saints in the playoffs in 2000. Just because they were playing in St. Louis, I couldn't disassociate from them. So St. Louis fans are welcome. I'm sorry you lost your team, but we're sorry we lost our team too. Let's just press on and be thankful that Stan Kroenke's the owner of our franchise instead of somebody else. Okay, let's see if there's any other questions here. Steve Ramirez, Green Bay finally comes to LA for the first time since 2018. Remember that game at the Coliseum? Aaron Rodgers was held up. Wade Phillips' defense did a great job that day. Tim Burns, in my opinion, any starting time used by people drafted in the 6th round and on is a win. Yeah, we feel the same way about that, right? The Skoranek stuff. Great call there, Tim Burns. Yeah, you get a click out of a guy. He makes one play for you. Bryson Hopkins' time for the Rams is about over, right? It is. 4th round pick didn't really work out. But boy, Super Bowl 56, he catches 4 passes, gets the seal block on the Cooper Kupp jet sweep on 4th down in the final drive. To me, they're in my Rams' hearts forever, right? I put their names in the Ring of Honor because you get those kind of clicks out of those guys. Absolutely, Tim Burns. I agree with you. Bill, why is it that every time I go on different NFL salary cap website, I see different numbers posted, like Spot Track and Over the Cap? Some of them are quicker to adjust. Some of them are taking into account already that you have to account for your rookie class. And you can gauge by where your team is drafting the range, like what a 19th overall pick will be. And so they gauge what your draft class is going to cost. And so that's kind of it. I think Over the Cap is the most respected. I think Spot Track is the easiest to navigate. And so, we say those numbers, we say it a little bit loosely, but that's what it is, Bill. I mean, I'll take correction from anybody else that wants to correct that for me, but that's what I've seemed to have noticed. If there's a third one out there, I don't know, but just like they always go to PFF for personnel, most people seem to go to Over the Cap. Like I said, I'll go to Over the Cap, but I'll also go to Spot Track. I'll go to Spot Track for a quick one because it's easier to navigate. USA Expat, Capoletti, what a personal story with his brother. Yeah, isn't it funny? He wins the Heisman in 73. They make a movie, Something for Joey, about his brother. John Capoletti's brother died of leukemia, and he broke down at his Heisman ceremony, talking about how his brother was an inspiration. It really moved the country, and it's interesting, I know, you want to say it's only 50 years ago, but it's just how quickly we move on and we forget. But Capoletti was the closest thing to a Wheaties All-American, Steve Garvey type of guy in that age, right? Everybody loved Capoletti, right? And in fact, when the Rams drafted him, a lot of people were surprised, but I think it was a case of Klosterman and Knox and them drafting the best player available. And Capoletti was productive. You knew he wasn't going to be a superstar in the NFL, but he was productive, and that guy came to play. He just really sacrificed his body big time, played with the Rams through 78. I did like Capoletti. Tim Burns, when they went to St. Louis, I actually teared up. Glad I didn't throw all my stuff out. Tim, when you go back to that time in 94, I had stopped writing. I was doing sports writing stuff up through about 89, 90. And then I went into ministry. I became a youth pastor. So I wasn't writing every day and doing that. And so I would follow the team, and I was still a Ram fan. And, maybe I wasn't doing all my due diligence, but I could remember telling my friends, I said, there is no way the NFL is going to allow the Rams to leave the LA market. I remember I swore up and down. And when the Lee Steinberg thing started about save the Los Angeles Rams, I really thought that's it. They're going to pull the team from Marge Schott in baseball. They're going to do something to Georgia. They're not going to leave the LA market. But they did. And I was wrong. And it was hard. It was hard not seeing their games on a regular basis until I got the Sunday ticket. But I tried to move off. I was always a Redskin fan. Redskins were like my second team. Still were, but not anymore. I don't root for the Commanders. That's what you call them, the Taxkins. And then the Chiefs. I really liked the Chiefs for a long time. In fact, it's only been in the Taylor Swift period that I really kind of turned on the Chiefs. I saw a Steve Bono playoff game, and I saw them lose to the Broncos. And I was mad for about 10 minutes, and then I was over it. When the Rams lose, I don't want to know anything. I don't want to hear anything. I don't want to be around anybody. I don't want anyone talking to me. And so I knew I couldn't shake the Rams. And so if they were in St. Louis, I was going to be rooting for the Rams. So when I got the chance, I checked out the Tony Banks games and got sick and got mad and thought Vermeil was a bust. And then, of course, they struck gold, right? They struck gold and got rid of Jerry Rome as the coordinator. He brought in Mike Martz, and the world changed, right? And so that's what happened. But yeah, it was hard. And I'm sure St. Louis fans, a few of them have logged in here and are saying pretty much the same thing, that it's hard for them, But I know how St. Louis people maybe feels about Stan Kroenke. Magnify that 100 times for Ram fans in LA towards Georgia, right? When they left for St. Louis, I felt sorry for Steve Rosenblum, USA expat. Yeah, we can go all day on that, huh? The shadiness of the whole affair that led to Carol Rosenblum's demise and Steve Rosenblum being fired by his stepmom. As they said, they would talk about how Rosenblum would change his will all the time. And just at that right time when he changed his will, that's when he drowned in the ocean in Florida. And then she gets full control of the team, and the son is aced out, and she basically fires him. I mean, that's like a sick Tommy Boy type of scenario, right? Except Georgia Frontiere was not, Bo Derek, right? It feels like Tommy Boy, and Steve Rosenblum was aced out. So that was brutal. I'm a little more passionate about Don Klosterman getting aced out by the Georgia John Shaw regime, which is probably another episode. And finally, last question here, because I've gone over the 50-minute mark. You guys have been awesome bearing with me. Tim Burns, your opinion, why isn't Mike Martz still an HC? I think his window closed probably about 10 years ago. He left the Rams after the 05 season. And I think he did end up going someplace else as an OC briefly. But I just think his window closed. And I think he was such an offensive guy. He was probably a much more just an offensive guy than a full head coach and everything. But yeah, I think it all just worked against him because it didn't end well in St. Louis. In fact, remember his last season there, he missed the back half out of health issues. And then the Rams fired him when the season was over. And then they moved on to Scott Linehan. So, all right, Bill, funny thing. Falcons rumors have Donald going to the Falcons. Are you serious? Are they saying Aaron Donald is going to go to the Falcons? I haven't seen that rumor. Man, I don't know. Someone's doing something with the shrooms. They better go ask Alice because she's 10 feet tall, because I can't imagine Aaron Donald going to Atlanta. I see Aaron Donald, if going anywhere, going to Pittsburgh. And also right now, I think Aaron Donald has to feel so optimistic about where the trajectory of this Ram team is going that I don't think he wants to leave, because prospects look really good. Frisco's a fraud. They may win the Super Bowl, but they're not a great team, right? And then the other teams are ascending and still have to make their mark. We've got a Super Bowl winning quarterback, Super Bowl winning head coach, and the Rams are really rising in the queue in the NFC, and I just can't see someone like Aaron Donald wanting to go over. And here's the brain dead part about Atlanta, right? If you're seriously thinking Atlanta Falcon fan, love Aaron Donald, but do I want a guy, or do I want to spend the money for a guy or spend draft capital for the guy that's in his 10th, 11th year going into the league? Really? Do I want to do that? Right? I'm going to build my own program, and I'm not just going to bring in some guy. Now, if that guy was a 10 or 11 year veteran quarterback, kind of like Matthew Stafford, the right quarterback in Atlanta is going to find a whole host of things. Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson. I mean, there's talent there that Arthur Smith just butchered for the whole season, right? All right. Now I think I got to let you guys go. Thank you.
Stone Groove, my man.
Thanks for checking in, guys. Thanks for hanging out. I hate leaving a live audience, but I also want to be respectful of your time. Check us out on Spotify. We're going to be back on Wednesday. Please leave comments. Hit like, hit subscribe as we try to build our numbers this offseason. For all you new folks joining us, thank you so much. And I'm Joe Terosian, and we're going to see you soon. God bless. Take care.